Hello everybody, welcome back to another Philfakov video, the Philfak Linguistic Academy of Linguistic Analysis. Today I'm really excited because based on the recommendation of a friend, he said when he saw that I was looking at geographic proximity and how present certain news is on certain countries' newspapers, he said, what about the political leaning of the newspaper? And if you guys watched the last video, then you saw me compare Canadian newspaper on the right and on the left, compare and contrast, to see if they were covering the Ukraine-Russia situation, number one, and if they were, how they were presenting the information. And I did joke at the time that Canada is not that important, people don't care. And, well, I think generally when you look at the global level, that's true. And today I'm quite excited because we're going to have a look at two American newspapers. And I'll be honest with you, I always look at the New York Times, and that is a newspaper on the left. I think traditionally, like Democrat voters tend to read the New York Times. But I just thought, I don't know another newspaper that's on the right. And I thought, okay, I'll just go with like two traditionally TV stations, media outlets, CNN and Fox News, and just look at their newspaper equivalent. Because I think that's a good example. Like CNN is the Democrat voter newspaper, Fox News is the most popular Republican voter newspaper. So today we're going to have a look at the Democrat newspaper first and the Republican newspaper second. So before we do, just to emphasize, they're both American newspapers, they're both the same distance. And so, according to the geographic proximity theory, they should have similar levels. But as you'll see today, it's somewhat different. So let's kick off with the Democrat newspaper. And if you're not interested in getting upset looking at news that's connected with war, I recommend you skip the Democrat section because it's pretty high on the scale. Okay, so there it is, the CNN newspaper, the Democrat reader newspaper. And as you can see straight away, looking at the pictures, you've got Trump, who's incredibly negative, I would imagine, for a lot of Democrat voters, and Putin, who I imagine is incredibly negative for a lot of Democrat voters. And so, top left picture, the first thing we see is two faces that usually, I guess, would raise negative emotions in a lot of people who read this type of newspaper. So this is interesting. Like if you look at the pictures themselves, if you first look at Donald Trump, you can't really say is that something that's generically emotional when you look at a picture of someone going like that. Same with Putin. Is it generically emotional, that idea of looking down somewhere without a lot of emotion on your face? Kind of poker face. So I think on its own, you would kind of give that a 0. Just to quickly review the scoring system we have here at the Philfakov Academy. If the picture or information is targeting what I call the mind, i.e. it's neutral information, it doesn't create a lot of emotion in the reader, then it gets a 0. If it's going to the heart, there are more emotions, the reader's starting to feel a bit sad, angry, or upset, then you get a 5. So 0 to 5 would be going towards the emotional. And then the big one going towards 10, the instinctive fright, flight, fight, is what I call reptilian. And it's when the reader is becoming very angry or depressed or very emotional and isn't really, focusing in on, okay, what information am I getting here? They've switched away from information and in the emotion zone, more or less completely if you're giving it a 10. So looking at this picture, I think without any prejudice, like any background feelings about these two figures, then you'd probably give it a 0. But we do have to keep in mind that, Donald Trump was presented in a very negative way for 4 years consistently, every day, in editions like New York Times. Like seriously, like every day, Donald Trump, front page news, negative, negative, negative. So we've got to factor that in. So I'm going to give it a 3. Now, obviously, some people might go full reptilian. Like when they see Donald Trump, it's like, oh, Donald Trump. So that you can. Would you give it a 10? Like seeing Donald Trump's face, how does that make you feel? Would you give it a much higher mark than I've given? Like perhaps you'd be thinking, no, this is making me very angry. Every time I see Donald Trump, I get very angry, right? In which case you might like to give that a 10. In my case, I'm fairly neutral towards faces of politicians. Sometimes the expressions are quite amusing. But yeah, I'll give it a 3, going towards the emotional, just because I understand that I can't give it a 0 in this context. And if you look at the title next to it, it says this may be Trump's most twisted appeal. Twisted, like he's twisted. He enjoys the suffering of children. Like it's like twisted. This is his twisted appeal to Putin, who's also a negative character. So this is probably generating a lot of emotions. And then what is the appeal? We don't know. That's a very interesting indicator. When the sentence begins with this, may be the most twisted appeal, but we don't know what this is. Like when you're delivering information to someone, you say, Trump asked Putin to do this. Okay, so Trump asked Putin to take action in this regard. This may be his most twisted appeal yet. You give the information and then you say this that refers to the information. But in the context of this CNN article, they say this, we have no idea what it is. So it's definitely not informative. It's definitely not informative. This is, I think, something that's becoming more and more consistent when you open up the internet and you look at news streams. They do have a lack of information by presenting this because that leaves a mystery for you and then it gets you to clickety click click. You get click-throughs with that type of language. So this may not be inherent in CNN. I think it's going to be becoming more popular absolutely everywhere as everyone is fighting for your click. Will you click on this? And seeing Donald Trump putting together and a this and a twisted, that's going to get the clickety action going on a lot of people. So getting the clickety action, you know, I think nowadays you need to get some emotion. So let's give that like twisted appeal. Let's give it a 5. Would you give it a 5? Would you give that a 5? Like, do you think that's fairly making you feel fairly emotional? Again, me honestly, like I look at that because I'm linguistically analyzing it. For me, it's 0. And that's the interesting thing. Once you start to linguistically analyze texts, very, very often it's a 0 because you're focusing in on your mind. Yeah. What overrides that is very, very interesting. So let's just jump onto the next picture, and this starts to override my linguistic analytical mind. I see a horrible picture of destruction, of large-scale destruction. This isn't like one small shop. This looks to be, if we zoom in on it, and again, guys, this is sad. Like if you don't want to look at a picture like this, just skip this part here. Go on to the next part. So you can see it's sad. They look to be carrying out what is a body. So commiserations to the family of that person. Let's hope that it's not a body. But anyway, they've got like flak jackets and stuff like that to protect themselves. Interesting enough, these guys don't look like they're wearing it. So an interesting mix there. And then again, you've got a bridge. And this is where, when you start to analyze the picture, if you can put your emotions aside, and it might be difficult, and if it is difficult for you, then probably best not to do this, really. We have a look at that. We see that there's a bridge structure, and it looks quite similar to a bridge from another picture we had a look at. I won't go into it now, but I think later I might have a look to see, is it the same bridge? It'd be interesting to know. Okay, and then there is a bit of information there, European, but I'm going to give that a 7, or maybe 8, 9. That's getting 9. It's getting very high. I'm going to give that a 9. It's like, goodness me, like seeing that picture makes me want to run away. It's horrible. And now I've managed to overcome it. I've looked at the bit of information about Irpin in Ukraine, but yeah. And then look at the text: a convoy en route to the besieged city. The besieged city was halted, a Ukrainian official says, as NATO warns. So very, very strong verb there, to warn. That means like action might be taken. And this is NATO. It's the military alliance, probably the world's strongest military alliance. And so if they're warning something, then that means maybe that military alliance will take action. So this is off the scale too. It does have, Ukrainian official says, are not withdrawing but repositioning. So it's not a direct threat. It's actually giving information. Their opinion are not withdrawing but repositioning in a very formal way. So that brings it down a little bit. I'm going to give it a 5. Okay, I feel that it's making me a little bit emotional, but what's stopping that is this information flow. We know that this was said by who? We said it was, the first one was said by a Ukrainian official, as NATO warns Russians. So it's not like Biden's butcher from before. I can't remember any of the Ukrainian president's quotes, Zelensky, but they were probably a little bit more on the emotional side with metaphors and things like that. Here we don't see any metaphors. It's quite calm. To save a little bit of time, I'm not going to go into analyze the other stuff there because I think it's going to be quite similar. And so we can see, let's say 3 and 9, like these two pictures here, 3 and 9, 12, average it out at 6. But again, like it's Putin and Trump, 6. Let's cheat and let's just add 2, and let's make it 8. No, we'll keep it at 6. Um, and then we add it to the one next to it, 5, that's 11, and we multiply that by 5. The reason why I multiply it by 5 is I just feel that the main news and the main pictures creates the main effect. And as soon as you have to scroll down to see something, it takes away from that emotion. So that came out as 55. 55 there for CNN. Before we move on to Fox News, I just think it's important to note that we see here that everything is, almost everything here is Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine. Putin's plan to prop up the ruble is working, so that's still about Russia, Ukraine, economic sanctions. Putin, war in Ukraine, something connected with Russia, negative, different news. And then this stuff, no. Okay, but what's interesting is that there are a couple, almost everything's about Russia, but here we've got China as the main player. China's tech layoffs could become a self-inflicted headache. So tech layoffs is a negative idea, it's self-inflicted headache for Xi. So do you notice that here they say Trump and Putin and Xi, they don't say president. Typically in newspapers, traditionally when you talk about a president of a country, newspapers do tend to put president and then the name of the president, usually the surname. But with the CNN, we see they're going for a very casual approach. Xi, like it could be Bob, Bob, it will become a self-inflicted headache for Bob, the fact that he had too much vodka or too much beer yesterday. So very informal style. And you can see that there's some negativity around the thing that's happening in China. And when we come down here, I'll zoom in. When we come down here, we see that we have Australian ambassador denied entry to Beijing trial of Australian TV host. So Beijing trial of Australian TV host. That's formal. The situation is negative, but the language is reasonably formal, but denied entry. Yeah, so we can see that there is some negative news about China as well. It's mostly about Russia, Ukraine. There's a bit of negativity about China, but the level is not quite as high. And it'll be interesting if you're interested in it to have a look at CNN as the war in the Ukraine drags on. As the news, I looked today in Canadian newspapers, there was nothing. Australian newspapers, nothing. New Zealand newspaper, I looked at nothing. Wait, there was one story in the New Zealand one about some Russian soldiers getting killed. But yeah, real loss of focus on that area in New Zealand, Canada, and Australian news. And with American news, will they also start to lose focus? We can see with CNN the focus is there. But if they do lose a little bit of that focus, what negativity will come in? Because that's the sad thing about the news. It doesn't matter if that sad news goes away, they'll find some more sad news to get you clickety. But let's have a look at the Republican newspaper. Before we do, let's just pause and just think, okay, that's the Democrats. Like, what are their political ideals? We're not going to go into that in depth. What do they think about life in general? And then what about Republicans and conservatives? Have a little think about that. Maybe press pause and then think, okay, based on your beliefs on what their beliefs are, what's your expectation of the news that you will see now? Okay, so press pause if you want to predict. If not, let's rock right into it. Okay, so I think the first thing we notice when we look at it, a quick scroll down, we see no signs of destruction. No signs of destruction. So if you remember, I mentioned that if I use my philological analytical mind, I tend to stay on the zero. I just focus in on information flow and don't get emotional. But when I see those pictures of destruction that happens in war, that overrides that part of my mind and pushes me into the reptilian, which is a sad and scared reptilian. But, who knows? Maybe if I'm in a situation, maybe I'll become an angry reptilian and kill another person just to survive myself. We don't know. It's just horrible. But if we have a look at this is Fox News, the Republican newspaper. Thankfully, or maybe not. Maybe you think people should see this, see horrible scenes of war. But for me, anyway, thankfully, there's nothing that looks that negative about war. But is there negativity? Let's have a look here. We can see that there is much more of a focus picture. Like with the CNN news, there was like picture number 1, picture number 2, picture number 3, picture number 4. And you've got that line of pictures, whereas with the Fox News, they've got that main central one at the top, which we're naturally going to look at. There are little pictures, but the size of this picture, really focuses in on it. So this one's going to be easy. We're going to give this one the multiplier of 5, no doubt at all. So we've got Joe Biden looking incredibly presidential. So stamp of approval. This is a very, very positive picture. Okay, it's got nothing to do with Russia-Ukraine. So what should we do with this? It's a positive picture, right? And it's a positive picture. I don't know, like obviously we've been looking at negative emotional ideas. This one's positive emotional. You've got the president of America looking presidential in his suit, gazing into look where his eyes are looking. He's looking into the future. You and I are looking at a screen, but the president is looking into the future. In the background, he's got a massive flag instead of a sky. And then you've got the White House. This wonderfully Greek-looking building. Is that Greek style, the architecture there? Or is that Italian? I think it's Greek. So, you know, a Greek architectural building in the background with another flag on top, some trees. It's all very positive. So it's moving us away from negativity. So I would give that like a -3. And it's moving us away from the war. Like we're not getting any negativity, emotional negativity about a war that's happening. And then let's have a look at the title, Biden administration, quite formal. So not Biden, it's the administration, a part of an institute, not one person, endorses, formal language, sex change surgery, hormone therapy for children. So that's a very, very informative and formal diplomatic text. Yeah, so I would give that a 0 in terms of the text. It's a 0. So that's quite interesting. The main news in the Fox newspaper has got nothing to do with the Ukraine-Russia war. And it's about Biden administration, not Biden, endorsing sex change surgery, hormone therapy for children. And so it comes out as a -15. Now, again, when we're looking at these newspapers, we have to think about the beliefs and prejudices here of the people reading them. Because like with the previous picture of Putin and Trump, if one person could look at that and not really care, and some might look at that and go, who are those people? I don't know them. Here, when a conservative person reads about sex change surgery, I'm going to guess, it's a fairly safe guess, and I'd probably bet quite a bit of money that conservative people might start to react a little bit emotionally. So a conservative person's reaction to that might be like a 3, or even like someone might go crazy and say, this man is representing Satan, he must be killed. They might go up to a 10 or something like that. Just like here with the Trump and Putin together, that might get a Democrat person going, somebody has to be killed. So it might be going into reptilian there. But, we have to guess. And this is fascinating, isn't it? When it comes to a picture of a war, we're all fairly similar. We all feel the same emotions. But when it comes to, a picture of a particular person, just their face, or a policy that they're enacting or endorsing, that might have a different effect. So let's just have a quick Ukraine-Russia spot. So no, that's Pelosi. Dr. Siegel produces Bruce Willis. Hunter Biden's ties to Chinese business. That's quite interesting. So again, there's stuff about Chinese. If you know the background of Hunter Biden, in these conservative newspapers, corruption connected to China. So a little bit of negativity coming through about China in this newspaper as well. Disney employees surprising message. Okay, so that's not Russia. Jada Pink Smith Chris Rock slap. Someone slapped someone. Someone about a missing mom on a beach. Bruce Willis again. Hunter Biden again. Look at that picture of Hunter Biden. Let's just focus in on that. Like, this man is obviously a criminal. Desperate. I shouldn't say obviously, should I? Maybe it's not obvious to you, it's obvious to me. Yeah, this looks like someone who's going through some extreme emotional problems. Who is Hunter Biden? The son of Joe Biden, but we don't know who he is. What's inside his mind? So, I would give that quite a high rating. I'd give it, it's making me laugh, but it would raise emotions of it would be like a 4. I would say there. You're starting to feel some sort of, maybe sad, angry, upset, confused, worried, concerned, maybe interested. Is ooh, well, who's this crazy person? So it's interesting, isn't it? If we look at it overall, we can't actually give it a rating for the Russia-Ukraine situation, because there's absolutely nothing there at all about Russia-Ukraine. So I'm going to ignore what we said there. I'm going to give it a big old 0, simply because there's no news relevant to what we're analyzing. So 0 for the Republican newspaper, and I've already forgotten what that came out as for the CNN. Okay, that was another picture there. 55. Oh my goodness me, 55 and 0. Let's put it in our Excel file because we're philologists and we love to work with Excel files. So there it is, our beautiful Excel file, and we have 55 and 0. So what we could have here, perhaps we could have like progressive and conservative. This is really interesting, isn't it? After this, we can write a Python program to like present some graphs on this. But yeah, so we see that that's much higher. I didn't make a note of the Canadian one. I'll come back later and put it in there. But if memory serves correctly, neither of them covered the war much at all, but the Canadian one did have a bit more. So the progressive Canadian one had a little bit more. I can remember it had a higher score. So I'll just put higher there for now. And lower. So that's fascinating. Out of Philfakov Academy, we don't really talk about the why, but I certainly encourage you to think about it, but think about it in an intellectual way. Don't rush to conclusions. Certainly draw a conclusion, but be open-minded to come back and change that based on information that's coming in. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. For me, it was fascinating to see such a difference between the main, most popular Republican news outlet, let's say Fox News, if not the main Democrat news outlet, one of the main ones. Such a stark contrast in the news being covered, with Russia-Ukraine dominating, I would say, almost completely dominating the progressive newspaper, whereas Biden and his son had a heavy dominance of the Republican one. So the Republican newspaper seems to be focusing their readers' attention in on the internal politics, while the Democrat newspaper seems to be focusing their readers' attention on external politics. Although with America's role in the global world as possible global policeman, maybe it's not external. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Look forward to catching you in the next one. Take care.